Hey everybody, King James here. Before we jump into this week's Fundy Fridays interview, I just wanted to kind of check in with everybody and let you know how we got here. So, Jen is working on a pretty big episode. It started out as an update on all of the scandal and allegations surrounding CCM artist Michael Tate. Since she started the project, as it kind of happens with us, it's grown into more of a full scale project about Michael Tate's band and everything associated with him. And on top of that, we've been getting hit with the same kinds of copyright claims we got for Linda McMahon. So, oh, and not to mention, Jen was trying to pull this whole DC Talk episode together while I was recovering from gallbladder surgery. It's been real hard out here for your dear Reverend. Please send prayers. But as fate had it, I just so recently happened to sit down with Weston Brown, a longtime Jennonite and author of the new and incredible memoir Banned. You can actually go to bandthebook.com right this minute and download the book for free. And as I'll say several times during the interview, I would do that now because I don't think it's going to stay free for very long. But Weston is an incredible person, but also, as you'll come to find out, a really cool person for us to talk to here on Fundy Fridays as well. A former homeschooled fundamentalist, now deconstructed Christian, who also just so happened to rub a lot of shoulders with some of America's Christian elite, people like the Duggars and the Bates. And then on top of all of that, Weston has recently been in a very public battle with his own fundamentalist mother to save library books in the schools from his old home district back in Texas. We're going to go through the whole story with Weston. I'm really happy you took the time to sit down and listen. I think you're going to have a great time. And again, if you want more info and find yourself particularly interested in Weston's story, I cannot more highly recommend that you check out his new memoir, Banned, now again, free for download at bandthebook.com. So once again, this week, Fundy Fridays interview. Next week, we plan to have Reverend Jen's full deep dive into Michael Tate and DC Talk ready for all of you. Oh, and before I get going, I do want to let all of our lovely Jennonites know, because I know a lot of you have been following it. I appreciate it. It has meant the world to me. But I want everyone to know that as of my most recent CT scan earlier this week, I am, for the time being, officially cancer-free. Thank you all so much for supporting me every step of the way, for propping us up emotionally, spiritually, financially, taking care of us through all of this. You all are the best people on earth. This is as much your victory as mine. As of right now, who knows what the future holds, but as of right now, King James is cancer-free. So with that good news, let's go ahead and move on to our Fundy Fridays interview with Weston Brown. Everybody, welcome back for another interview with Fundy Fridays. Once again, I know I say it every time, it's because it's true every time. I am super excited to speak with our guest today. Today we're sitting down with Weston Brown. Weston is a perfect guest for Fundy Fridays for a variety of reasons. So many, I don't even want to mention any of them beyond the fact that he has recently authored a memoir. So Weston, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself, why you're here, and about your memoir, Banned?
I would love to, James. Thank you for the intro. I am so happy to be here. I am a longtime fan. I think I was around even for some videos that were released and then taken down and re-released and edited. I've been around for a
Ooh.
minute, and just such a privilege to be part of the community. Finally made my way, meeting other people, making new friends. It's been phenomenal.
And
But
I
my
want to let everyone
background.
know, sorry, I don't mean it. We have been trying to set this up forever. Weston has been so patient with us. I think we started, and Jen and I tracked it. The first time we talked to you about an interview was, I think, 2 days before I got my cancer diagnosis. So you got jettisoned violently out of the picture for us for a while. And we were so happy when you were still interested when things stabilized. So, but for reference, he's been patiently waiting on us since October of last year.
Oh my gosh, happily waiting. Everything in what do we say? Everything in its season. Everything has a
Oh,
season. So I grew up in, I mean, just the heart of American Southern Southern evangelicalism in the Dallas, Texas area, somehow at the intersection of just every cult in the book. I grew up under Bill Gothard and ATI, had close friendships with the Forsyth family, the Duggar family, crossed into Vision Forum, crossed over into Patriot Academy with David Barton, the Wall Builders organization, a lot of like political, the whole mix, as everyone's very familiar with.
Hi, I'm David Barton, founder of Wall Builders.
And I'm Tim Barton, the president of Wall Builders.
Wall Builders is a name taken from the Bible book of Nehemiah, which is a story of people getting involved to rebuild their nation, to restore the things that have been torn down. We think that's a great message for America today.
Specifically from Nehemiah 2:17, where Nehemiah said, "Come, let us rebuild the walls, that we may no longer be a reproach." And so we feel God has called us to help rebuild those walls, the religious, the moral, the constitutional walls.
As I grew up, had questions about it, didn't really know what was right. I just knew something was wrong for the longest time. And then as I got to my later teens, started grappling with my sexuality. I eventually left the home, came out to my parents, and had kind of a very stern rejection, very swift and unfortunately expected. Moved on, kind of started my own life, rebuilt, moved to California. And then a few years ago, found that my parents had taken the conversation publicly, and they were going in their local school board meetings where I have 8 younger siblings. None of them have ever stepped foot in a public school, but my parents were showing up to these school board meetings, making false accusations against librarians, accusing school librarians of distributing pornography to children. My mom filed charges and tried to have a librarian arrested. Of course, everything was unfounded and proven not to be true. The books they were trying to ban, though, were about 80% for queer characters and queer representation.
While in high school library in early March, librarians had books on display that contained sexually explicit content. Gone, a teacher, a student crossing the line. This book is about a 17-year-old student having sex with his 30-something-year-old hot teacher on display. Granbury Middle School has similar books that describe teachers drugging students and having sex with them. That's in your libraries. Granbury High School has The Bluest Eye, 120 copies being used and promoted by teachers in lit circles. You need to look at it and read excerpts. There is a book author who has 15 titles in our libraries. We reviewed 9 of those books. All of them are extremely sexually explicit, and they are heterosexual books. They are not LGBTQ, and those are trash also. What would make a librarian display a book in a city like this with nudity and sexually explicit content in a student library? And how do these principals walk in there and not see it? I do not know.
So when I found out about that, and I found out about it through Twitter back in the day, I decided that enough time had passed and the time was right for me to step back and tell my side of the story. So I went back to my small hometown near where I grew up and showed up at the school board meeting and gave a message, and that had a really impactful reach, urging parents to listen to educators, librarians, really waving the flag of the problems of censorship, and saying, as someone who grew up in this environment, all my parents effectively did was delay the inevitable, but none of these things influenced me because I simply did not have access to them until I was in my early 20s.
A few months ago, I saw my mom, Monica Brown, standing at this podium calling for the removal of books and asking for the school to follow the guidance of a religious leader to determine what information students can access. From a young age, I was taught to give a voice to people who were disregarded, elevate the marginalized, and love my neighbor. Today, I strive to be the person I needed when I was young, someone who would stand up, speak out, and protect the kid that felt alone.
After that school board speech, I realized I still had a lot more to say. So I ended up writing a book, and it's actually out now. And depending on when you're watching this, it's free right now. I'm in the process of traditional publishing. It's a raw manuscript, so you will definitely find some funky sentence structures, maybe some misspelling, some typos, but the heart of the story carries through. And it was important to me to release it and not hold it. I wanted it to reach as many people as possible. So since then, I've just been truly blown away by the reception. It's topped charts.
There we go.
across Amazon and Apple Books. and it's gotten a really incredible reception so far. So that's kind of where I'm at. And now coming back to dive in on the deep, dark underbellies of these organizations that masquerade as the other famous documentary, Shiny Happy People, the smiles, Christian values, small business owners, homeschoolers, whatever. But there's a really dark side that this community is well aware of, but I think so many other people are waking up to, and that's what I'm here to talk about.
As I'm sure you all can tell, again, that's the reason I wanted Weston to do his own intro, because he brings a lot of things to the table that we talk about here at Fundy Fridays, and I'm going to try and get through as much of them as I possibly can. Everything from the tried and true, hyper strict evangelical upbringing that we know so many of you all went through, to the terrible difficulties of coming out as queer in the middle of all of that, being kicked out, and then having this incredible resurgence. And I swear, I love this book, y'all. I cannot tell y'all enough how much I love this book. And to me, it really did feel like a modern kind of hero's journey to a certain extent. It's absolutely incredible. But I'm going to try and get us started off with kind of where we usually start in these types of particular stories, which is with your family. Very specifically, there is one individual we need to talk about. Now, depending on how this is edited, I'm not entirely sure yet. I always figure it out as I go, but our audience may have already been introduced a little directly to your mother, Monica, but she is a central figure in the book and was kind of the perpetrator of a lot of the spiritual abuse that you underwent. And I know that's a big blanket term, and I don't want to speak for you or about anyone, but can you tell us a little bit more specifically about your family, but particularly since I know she was such a kind of central controlling character over it all? Talk to us a little bit more about your mom and the role she played in this story.
It's one of those things where it's a very complicated character. She grew up in small town Texas, as did my dad. They met and married. My mom specifically had a fairly traumatic upbringing, and in my perspective, that's where the appeal of religion swooped in, offering control, offering this message that really is beautiful. Join this community, follow these rules, and you will be safe, you'll be loved, you'll be cared for. It's a beautiful message. Unfortunately, it's not as simple as that. It's usually followed with a lot of control and power structures and hierarchies that ultimately end up being extremely harmful. But she was in that the 80s, 90s movement of the satanic panic and grew up under, coming through the AIDS crisis, the gay agenda was things I remember hearing about. I remember my family, for whatever reason, we were very anti-sports, but my mom being really worried about trans athletes and how that would mess things up. Even back when I was really young in the early 2000s. And so they really clung to religion as a way to offer safety and security, and it's just most simple terms. But as they got further and further in, and as political messaging and the political temperature started to rise, it just shifted them further and further into extremism, where my mom and dad are very anti-education. And I don't mean anti-higher education. I have 8 younger siblings, and none of us have ever stepped foot in a public school because my parents believe, if you go into any kind of public education, whether it's we're talking elementary school or higher education, that you're going to be indoctrinated and that you're going to be kind of deprogrammed and reprogrammed as just a sort of pawn or drone for the government, and that your best chances of being a free thinker, your best chances of making a good life for yourself will happen for you if you stay at home and only learn from very few select sources.
It's unfortunate, but I'm also a faith person, and I believe there's some things that I've chosen that people would call crazy faith. Like I homeschooled my children, and that was a year-to-year thing. I was never against the public school. I was living a free life, and I'm still living it. That's why I roller skate on Friday mornings, and that's why we went to the park yesterday in the middle of the day, because we wanted that kind of life. It was more about lifestyle. It wasn't about a rejection of the public school. It was, why waste all that time and why do it that way when you can have so much more family time and be there for your family when they're sick, and all the stuff that we've done over the years because we were free and we weren't confined. So, and besides that, I don't want to be indoctrinated. And I know for a fact they're using apps over in Glenrose for first graders that's woke. And I'm pretty sure they're using it in Granbury. I'll find out and I'll let you know, because it really didn't matter to her what happened to my kids. My kids aren't in the school district. And they probably never will be now. I think they've sealed that deal. And that's okay, because I'm a free bird. I'm free.
in a way, if you stepped far enough back, we lived in the suburbs. I think people would have described us as kind of a kooky Christian family, but we went on, annual vacation, kind of middle class family. But underneath that was no education, no doctors even. I remember one time I cut my hand and we went and I got a tetanus shot, and my mom was freaked out that they gave me a tetanus shot because she's very staunchly against vaccines. And so it comes into even being a bit anti-science and just a lot of superstition. So at a glance from a bit of a distance, you see sort of a normal family. Then, the girls in my family are being groomed to only be a housewife, which is a very honorable role, and I would never demean it, but it's one that needs to be chosen and not one that needs to be forced. And that's kind of the standard in the family. There's so much more I could go into, but I feel like that's kind of the basis of control of information. Never go to a friend's house. The friend either has to come over, very much so thinking about those old diagrams of the authority umbrellas that we've seen with like IBLP. Everything had to be under the parents' authority. Every piece of media had to be screened, very specifically groomed to be pastors, spiritual leaders, to influence education, to influence business for this big kingdom mission, which kind of rolled up into have as big of a family as you can, influence local government, and a strong turn towards, Christian nationalism in every sense.
And to speak a little bit, I'm saving it for the book. Read the book, especially right now. I don't know how long this free and self-published raw manuscript thing is going to last. But there's a segment in your book, you talk about the medical side of things in particular. There's a segment in the book that I think is really just a testament to your writing, and I won't spoil anything, but it involves his family's approach to medical care and kind of how that takes a particularly dark and sad turn for someone very close to you. Again, I won't spoil, but it's just an incredible segment in the book. But I did want to mention, you noted your siblings. Now, one thing I know that particularly happens a lot in these situations that like you grew up in is you're kind of encouraged to have your siblings as your friends, and really your only friends. Like the family is very insular in that way. And likewise, when you're rejected the way you had been, it is particularly cruel, for lack of better phrasing, or at least it seems like on the outside, we can take your whole world away type situation. And as someone who is currently dealing with that, I know it's really hard to talk about. Would you mind commenting on that and just speaking to that unique sibling relationship that comes up in these kinds of evangelical families?
The dynamic that I have is really interesting because I'm the oldest in my family, but oldest by a gap of 7 years. So I have siblings. I'm 31 now. I have siblings as young as 8 or 9. And so there's a lot in their early teens. So there's not only is there this age gap, but in a lot of ways I raised my siblings. My parents struggled financially. They did not pursue traditional means of employment or earning. A lot of fears of, don't have a job, don't work for the man, run your own business, which is, valid. And I love small business owners, but I think theirs was a little bit driven more by paranoia, but that the result was struggling financially and this idea chain of authority. We've seen this in groups like the Duggars, where the older siblings take care of the younger ones. Also follows in that grooming for being a parent in the future, that's kind of the only path, the only reality you think is that, well, of course, I'm going to grow up and be married and have a large family. That is the only choice.
Mom cannot be everywhere at all times, and so my older children help to take care of the younger children.
A big buddy helps you get dressed, brush your teeth, and keep track of you when you're out and about.
When the baby is born, it's my buddy until it's weaned. And then from there, it goes to whoever's turn it is to get a buddy.
And so the sibling relationship being a parental figure to them was dysfunctional because you can't be a parent to your sibling. You can be their sibling. And yet being thrust into that role as a child at the time felt like an honor and something I was happy for, but was a responsibility that was crushing to a young person who's still developing and figuring out their interworld. So in one way, I mean, of course, I love them so much and it's bonded me to them in a really close way. Of course, at the point of leaving, whenever I came out to my parents, they went on a very expected, the rhetoric of we have to protect your siblings from you, which is, I've never, there's no demonstrable thing of harm that's ever been caused. I was the one who would get up and make them breakfast and help them through our cobbled together home education programs and be there to support them. So then to immediately be pivoted as you can't see them or speak to them. Even I have siblings who are now 19 that still do not have phones. They live in the country. They're 19 years old with no forms of identification, no access to the internet. I think there's a family phone they have access to, but you can imagine in the environment having access and being free to access or different things. So it's really painful. Life is short, and there's a lot of memories that have just I'm hopeful for the future. And surprise, bit of a spoiler, some of the siblings that have aged out of the home I have a relationship with, but there's years of space that's just gone. And going from being caretaker and just extremely close with them to not is a unique kind of pain and unique kind of grief that is profoundly hurtful. And you just have to sit with that and hope that the future changes and that they can find their own path. Because growing up in that extremism, I don't know their perspective of me. It would make sense now that I've matched my parents and they've stepped into activism, and so have I now, just on different sides of the issue. But I could imagine that some of my siblings might even not like me. And that was something that made it hard for me as well, is thinking in their world, I am disrupting this narrative that's been built around them. And will they see it as trying to break in and help them get out? Or will it be a threat to the family union? So it's a very tender spot. And it's where we are right now because they're at home. This isn't a memoir looking back at my life 50 years ago. It's very much so still in the present moment. So it's really gritty and hard. And I think that comes through in the book of not being too much of a wet blanket ending of like, this is all so bad. I think there's hope in the story, but it's important to remember that these stories of rejection and shunning still happen today. And, it's still very, very, very prevalent within communities like this.
And it's something that I think is well written about in the book. You probably didn't see it, audience, because I tend to put people's faces up when they're talking, unless they're me. But I smiled when you mentioned that you have a relationship potentially with some of the ones that are aging out, because that wasn't covered in the book. The book kind of ends there, and that was something I was hoping to find out. I was like, oh, good. And I don't want to overshadow everything with that. I just want to highlight that that's something that even I didn't know. I am also very curious because one thing that really got me, and I just have to say, was that for all of the banning and keeping you out of things and out of their lives, your mother seemed more than happy to take Christmas presents for the children. I can't help but wonder if she understands just how exploitative the life she's chosen is kind of inherently. How much exploitation and manipulation you have to enact on a daily basis to get resources if you're going to live the way that they live. I know you mentioned Branson specifically. What a place that is. Jen and I also have the kind of love-hate relationship I think everyone in this area has with Branson.
Branson, the entertainment capital of the world. With all the shows, lakes, and family fun, anytime's a great time to visit. Call 1-800-421-1331.
Because Branson's a life of entertainment.
Do you have any particular favorite Branson attractions? I'm curious.
My goodness. So it's one, the intersectionality of the clashing Christian theologies is wild, because we were talking about Bill Gothard and these super fundamentalist organizations. We also were in mega churches, Joel Osteen, Kenneth Copeland. We went to Keith Moore's church, who's another famous evangelical word of faith preacher who has a massive congregation in the Branson area, and also Silver Dollar City. So those are my memories of Branson. Oddly enough, the Silver Dollar City, I remember going as a kid with some of my cousins and having a good time. So Branson is kind of in like a neutral zone for me, but I haven't been in a number of years. But I do remember going to Keith Moore's church, sitting in the coldest auditorium I've ever been in, rattling while this very angry but happy, very odd blend of human emotion would rant about God wanting us to be rich and passing a little golden like tithe plate down the aisles as that message went down. So that stands out pretty clear in my mind.
That's the Branson experience, I will say. The beauty of the Branson experience is it's 1,000 different things at once. So I wanted to talk a little bit about your family's beliefs too. You mentioned earlier, they kind of came together very eclectically. And I know that for a lot of our audience, that's kind of a point of separation, where some families that are considered, evangelical isn't all the same shade. For some families, they're rigid IBLP devotees, or they're stuck with one church, one pastor, one ideology. Whereas it doesn't really seem like that was the case for you. So can you talk a little bit about how your family's belief structure, which was very important to them and kind of central to how you all lived your lives, can you tell us how they constructed that, like where these beliefs all came from?
No.
That's the one answer I wasn't expecting.
So I can just tell you how it was and how it got to be that way. I don't know. I mean, my parents, I will say, I think economic challenges were one thing that put them in a position of desperation, and it made them more vulnerable to things like multi-level businesses and multi-level marketing, things that sold this dream of follow these rules, do this, have enough faith, work hard enough, and you can have control of these things, even for their health, right? We grow up in small towns with no real access to healthcare that's affordable anyway. And so if it, even those economic conditions, and someone comes along and is like, hey, did you know you can pray for this? Or did you know you can buy this essential oil and achieve healing? When you can't access healthcare in an easy, dignified, safe way, you are more prone to those things. So I think part of it was necessity, and part of it is just a developing case of some sort of, in my own words, I mean, there's no formal diagnosis, but like a religious psychosis that sets in and gives them this sort of thinking of, I think, to cope with how vulnerable they are in the world, and how vulnerable they've made themselves in the world, using these tools of faith to achieve healing or financial stability. And those things took us to extremes of deaths in the family and even into homelessness. There's a chapter where my parents believed that debt, including a mortgage. So, for any of our Dave Ramsey fans and our financial friends, we will also listen to that. But they believed that debt was hindering their small family business from growing, and so sold the house that they were well right side up in. It wasn't a matter of simply not being able to afford it. Moved a family of 11 people into an RV, hoping that the act of faith of selling our home would be enough to prove our worthiness to God, so that he would then bless the business so that we could then have a home. And that lasted, homeless. I was there for that. That was 2 years, a little over. The reasons why and how it comes together, I couldn't tell you, because picture characters like Bill Gothard, and then range over to evangelical pastors like Kenneth Copeland or Jesse Duplantis or Joel Osteen or Andrew Womack. None of these people vibe with each other, and their theology is all sorts of backwards. One of them will teach that God gives you an illness to teach you a lesson. And one of them will teach you that you didn't have enough faith, so you got the illness, so you have more faith and get rid of it as a testament to God. One might teach you that, you're getting a sickness so that you can have a testimony to help others. I mean, it's just creative storytelling, and I wish these people would get into creative writing, because they certainly have the minds for it. But it becomes dangerous when it affects your day-to-day life decisions for healthcare, finances, education, and even forming and breaking friendships. I mean, my mom had a dream about a family friend, and the dream painted the family friend in a negative light, and my mom ended the friendship based on that alone. So, like, that kind of, not sure how to categorize it, magical thinking, grandiose thinking, you just kind of take what serves you in the moment. But I agree, there is no answer. I guess I'm agreeing with myself. There's no answer, because it's a house of cards. If you question one of these beliefs, the whole thing starts to crumble, because it's tied to very profound and meaningful things. Like a parent grieving the loss of a child has a whole religious answer to it. So if you challenge another question over here, it's also fragile, that you just have to protect even the smallest beliefs, because it's also interconnected, that the way you deal with really large life moments is all interconnected. So you just don't challenge anything, and we just keep moving forward. God's good, and that's the only answer.
I don't think she knows what she believes, but she believes it with her whole heart. I wrote in my notes, I was like, can somebody please introduce this woman to Dungeons and Dragons? I'm like, we could solve a lot of problems. She'd be an incredible game master. Like, she's got a vivid imagination.
And that's like, I come back to it, and I'm like, a lot of the people I grew up with, it's like it creates a vacuum, because there's not hobbies, right? We're not going to the movies. We're not playing sports. we are staying at home baking bread, which is fantastic. I still bake bread, but not because it's the only thing I have to do. And I think that that's something that there's this whole void of people who are so afraid of the world around them, afraid of connecting to other people. There's such an urgency to save souls. It's like we can't waste time with a stupid hobby like painting or creating something. And so the human mind has all this creative energy and whatever. And then you kind of get into it's like, oh, all of this extremism could have been like a fantastic pottery hobby or whatever the case is. Like, oh, please get a hobby, take up a creative writing class, because when it starts to bleed into superstition in your life and it gets dysfunctional really fast. I mean, even my parents were giving pastors a tithe, which in the Christian line of thinking is 10% of your income. And some of the pastors, like Kenneth Copeland would be one that comes to mind, owns private jets, multiple homes, very huge properties. And he'll tell his followers, you can tithe 10%, but don't you want God to bless you more than that? Why don't you tithe higher than that? So at some points of time, my parents were giving 10, 15, 20% or more of the little income they had, kind of following the same mindset of someone with, like, I would liken it to a gambling problem of, this might be my shot, or this is all I know to do to get myself to a better situation. And so that money flowed from their small business that they ran, that we ran, that I ran, into the pockets of multi-million dollar net worth pastors who were saying, give a little more money, stick with it a little bit longer. The light's coming, the answer's coming, the faith will pay off. Just hang in there and keep the checks coming. I mean, looking back, it's such a transparent scheme, but in the moment, it feels real and it feels scary, but the scary feeling is exciting. And that vulnerability is almost like I'm proving this to God and it's going to come back tenfold. And that was what we were told. And looking back, it seems so hollow, but in the moment, it's something else.
That boredom that you talked about and that kind of incredible restriction, it leads to the evangelical people we've seen doing what Jen and I have termed complicated fun, a lot of complicated fun. And one of the complicated types of fun and belief and value affirmation your family really liked to participate in, it seemed, was the conference and camp circuit. It seemed like you were voluntold to go to a lot of these things. 3 in particular stick out in my mind just because they're ones you talked about heavily in the book, but also ones we hear from fans of the show about having been subjected to as well. So I'm going to kind of just see what your thoughts are as I say each of these things. Big Sandy.
Oh my gosh, that place isn't real. If I wasn't there for probably, I mean, we went for at least 5 or 6 years, something like that.
Y'all were keeping their lights on.
We were keeping them employed. Yes, yes. I mean, yeah, no, keep going on your list. Yeah, Big Sandy. Oof.
Well, tell me a little bit then about Journey to the Heart.
So this is one where I really wanted to paint the picture in the book for just how surreal and haunted this place is. We go to this conference center called the Northwoods Conference Center. It's in the middle of nowhere. The buildings are massive. They're filled with ornate, like, wood paneling and carved intricacies with massive chandeliers and like candles hanging off the side of the wall, like this like old like woodland mansion, like truly ornate, over the top, taxidermied animals. Just, you walk in and it's a powerful, reverent, and scary as all hell place. And it's a last kind of step in, now reflecting back, indoctrination. As you put teenagers in this, they would even go without food for fasting. So you're away from home for sometimes the first time in your life. I'd only left home maybe once or twice before that. You're subjected to incredible amounts of very emotional religious rhetoric. They are making you as a teenager fast to feel closer to God. So you're dysregulating like your literal like blood sugar and sleep cycles, and all of these things are mixing together to try to really solidify you in this movement. And it all ends on this note of you making vows to not marry until you're 30, which that's a whole other thing that conflicts with so many other genres of Christianity, to never step foot in a movie theater, even one that men should stay clean shaven. I think that was just a Bill Gothard personal preference. I'm not sure where that came from. Deeply entrenching these ideas to try to prevent you from ever leaving, because that becomes your religion, your spirituality, your community. And a lot of people even work in it. So then it becomes your source of income and employment as well. So it becomes very hard to leave, even though you're technically welcome to go at any time. The implications are something else.
I barely ever read my Bible. My mom and dad got a divorce when I was like 7.
I didn't like to be real personal with other people and tell them all about my life. I just want to keep that all to myself.
Journey the Heart helped me with my attitude toward my parents. It helped me toward my attitude toward God, life. It gave me a whole new perspective on things.
We get up at 6 in the morning and we'd all meet and just have a little devotional together.
The Journey of the Heart helped me with my walk with God.
It's just getting real before God, you know, and not just putting up this front.
I got down on my knees in the cabin there and just prayed and asked God to forgive me of my sins and cleanse me and come into my heart. And He saved me that night.
And just for reference, I don't know if I mentioned it, both the Big Sandy Conference and Journey to the Heart, as I recall, both are IBLP related. Those are both IBLP programs, Bill Gothard programs. Gothard famously of Duggar fame, but other places as well. And I always have to ask people, anybody who interacts with Bill Gothard, you got very close to, again, read the book, you got very close to Bill Gothard in one of the more tense segments of the book. But I'm curious as to, I always ask people this, how did your family rectify this message of marriage and procreation and strong men leading Christian families that was being delivered by, how did I write this in my note? I said a lifelong bachelor and virgin who looked like a Republican Keebler elf in a boxy suit.
That's incredible. Fantastic. That's him. And it's interesting. I think it just comes down to, like I said before, creative storytelling. I mean, I remember around the dinner table, my mom was like, well, you know, it does make sense for you to wait until you're 30 and established to get married, but you also listen to God. So maybe, you know, don't date and don't really do anything. But if you do find someone, then jump in, you know, full steam ahead. When you put the smallest amount of critical thinking back across these beliefs and it's go, okay, well, if you believe this, what if you flip it? What if this is a circumstance? What if you turned this around? And it's just like, oh, I don't know. I mean, I saw this all the time. A parent, you know, a couple might experience the heartbreak of a miscarriage, and a pastor would say, oh, well, that was the Lord's will, and your child is now in heaven, and God wanted to teach you something and give you a testimony. And then they you know, would pray and couldn't get pregnant, and finally would get pregnant again, and they'd be like, oh, well, like, you've had enough faith and God's blessing you with this. The story can change for whatever the context is. It's wild to watch it. I mean, it's very inconsistent reflecting back on it, but it's just the way things are. You surrender. Instead of at least choosing to interpret your life for yourself, you surrender that to your parents or you surrender it to your pastor, and then they kind of dictate your reality around you.
Well, we'll come back to IBLP in just a moment, because most of you who watch our channel, but if you don't especially, the presence of Bill Gothard means other people are coming, shall we say. So stay tuned. I know who y'all want to talk about. But I also want to highlight IBLP wasn't the only place that had you being sent to conferences and camps. Specifically, before we move on from this part, I did want to talk about, can you tell me a little bit about Patriot Academy?
So that's a hard pivot. I think that IBLP and maybe Patriot Academy have some overlap in their attendees, but to my knowledge, the higher levels of organization aren't connected. Patriot Academy is largely run by David Barton. They connect with homeschool families. They spread a lot of fear and messaging around the moral decline of America. They teach a lot of alternate history. I mean, I myself sat in sessions where they taught that slavery was a necessary evil. You can imagine how that goes, just far right alt history.
Here at PA, we're covering all kinds of topics. This week, I'm talking about things like religion, morality, and government. As much as we want freedom, we want liberty, we want limited government, we want great economies, it doesn't really work without religion and morality. And today we kind of seem confused. We want freedom, but not really religion. But those two things actually go hand in hand.
They basically will prey on homeschool families who are uneducated and already primed towards, you know, looking back, white supremacist ideologies. And then they feed them their version of history that they believe. And they have camps and seminars where, these homeschoolers who don't really have much better to do, who've been kind of indoctrinated into this alternate version of American history, then they give them purpose by saying, you want to make a change, stand up for your country, protect the people you love, take us back to America's roots, come to our camp. In the instance that I went to, they had a relationship with someone at the Texas Capitol in Austin, and they were able to get us on the floor of the House to do mock presentations. So even though we had no actual formal education, they were giving us the bare bones to know how to navigate the legal system. And one of the things they would say is one of the things you hope for is that things get taken to the Supreme Court so that you can establish precedent. They were like, the government is big and bad, but we have to play in this game. And if you do it right, you can help. They didn't say this, but the message was sabotage it from the inside, kind of like you see now with dismantling things like the Department of Education. But you're primed, so you've got religious extremism now meets political extremism. And the reason why it works is because the people involved in this, the children who are involved in this, are generally really good-hearted individuals who believe this message of fear. They believe that people around them are in danger. And so the higher ups are clearly insidious and not to be trusted, but the people that sometimes follow them are incredibly earnest in their pursuit of doing the right thing, protecting the country that they love. And it plays on that earnesty, it plays on that passion.
As today's generation, we hold the future of America in our hands. It is time for us to preserve and protect liberty for future generations. Join us as we step forward and accept the torch of freedom.
We're not looking for just anyone. If you think you're up to the challenge, if you believe God has called you to be a leader for a purpose, to do something, not just be somebody, then we hope to see you at a future Patriot Academy.
And so you get in, you learn the legal system, you learn how to pass bills, and then you can come back for internships, and people would go on. And I knew several people who ended up having internships, people like Ted Cruz, who, infamous Texas politician, well-hated, vacations in Mexico while Texans are suffering and dying, well hated by very many, but it gives that pipeline. So you've got the religious foundation, and then you get a little older, you're not allowed to go to college, you're not allowed to do quite a few things, but there is this open door into this political movement, which is, Christians have a martyr complex. They want to believe that they're being attacked and that they're fighting dark, evil forces. And now you get a chance to make a difference by joining this program, learning the ropes, and making change that you want. A funny aside from that, though, is the students that I went with, we had a mock session, and the adults taught us everything that we needed to do. And then they were going to sit back and observe as we ran the session. And usually we would pass things like abortion bans. We would pass things like dismantling the, educational systems. We'd pass things related to censorship and allowing the government to oversee what materials could be used in an educational context. But some fellow rebellious students drafted and passed a marijuana legalization bill, and David Barton lost his mind, started screaming at everyone. He came back later and apologized, but that is one thing that gives me a little hope for the future, is that even in that case, the people within this environment were like, well, it'll bring in taxes, and the science shows it's not harmful, and everything we know to be true. And of course, the young people were indoctrinated, but not enough that in this fake session, we, at least for one day, legalized marijuana in Texas. I mean, that's like one lighthearted story, but many times young adults get groomed into this system and become assistants and rise up in the ranks. They, start at the lowest rung and then rise up, pushing forward kind of a Christian, or not kind of, a Christian nationalist agenda within Texas politics. And they don't just operate in Texas. That's just where I happen to be.
And I think you highlighted something that we've talked about before on this channel, and I want to reiterate again, because we have a lot of former missionaries, political activists, folks of that kind who kind of really regret later, like, oh man, what was I participating in? Something you thought was good at the time and were sold was good at the time because you were probably a good person who wanted to make the world better. Unfortunately, someone sold you a line of how to do that was not very truthful. I do think it's interesting, though, and I wanted to bring up Patriot Academy in particular, because again, singing the praises of this book, you kind of supported my hypothesis a little bit to a certain degree, and you get a lot of that in this book. I want everyone to know there's a lot of really interesting lines of thought presented about this evangelical life in band, but one that I thought was interesting was kind of presenting all of these different conferences back to back, and especially from your perspective as the tired, overworked oldest sibling who's just coming home from the grocery store to find out he's going next week on a bus trip to the middle of nowhere to do all of this stuff, and your experiences comparing them. I think a lot of people wonder, like, why do some people deconstruct their Christianity and some people don't? Why do some people go this way and some people go that way? And my theory, at least personal theory here, has been that because evangelical and conservative are not entirely the same, they just look very similar. The ones that lean more evangelical, who are more God over Trump, I think those kids tend to burn out a little harder and deconstruct. Whereas the Trump ones, the conservative leaning evangelical families, who are more about Trump and QAnon than they are about God necessarily, they don't seem to be as flapped, ironically. And it kind of came across in your presentation here. Bless their hearts. The descriptions of Journey to the Heart, y'all sounded so sad. And I'm just like, I want to take these kids out to see a PG-13 movie. Good Lord. But
Yes.
Whereas Patriot Academy, I'm like, well, at least this is interesting. These people are talking, they're engaged, there seems to be a purpose. Everyone's not just like, when is this over? And so I think that's very interesting. And I thought it was, again, an astute observation you made, just that, you know, you have one event that tends to break faith and the other that tends to embolden it. And I wonder if Christian parents are picking up on these dichotomies. You also describe these, I have to say, these, as someone who's never gone to any of these events, you describe them in remarkable ways. One thing I do have some experience with that you put very, very well is, and I'm sure people sound off in the comments if you have experience, but ugly maroon church carpeting. Your description of ugly maroon church carpeting, specifically, I believe from, I think it was Journey to the Heart, was so vivid that I felt like it was under my feet, and I wanted you to know that. Do you have any theories as to why they picked that terrible color?
I've got nothing. You know, there's two. There's the maroon, and there's the lesser known teal. That's also
that's
a
the
bright...
modern churches. I thought they were built in the 80s and after.
I don't know. I wish I could know, but that was something I wanted to write about, was for whether someone had an experience like mine and just the validation and being like, yes, I saw that too. I experienced. I wanted the writing to be vivid and imaginative, not only for the people to feel that sense of camaraderie that someone else who's gone through it, but for someone who's totally on the outside to be like, what in the world? What is it like? And to tell the truth of the story, but also paint the picture around it of what it looked like and smelled like and tasted like and all of that, because it's just an experience like none other. And looking on the outside, when you have a well-rounded, for the most part, adult individual, you can immediately point out the dysfunction. But remember, when you grow up in this and it's all you know, it's all you know. And it's just a really jarring thing to get out of it. I think, to your point in the theory of how disconnected and eclectic all of these systems are, I think that's what helped launch me out of it, because I realized the amount of arrogance I would have to have, because we believed we had this special, perfect little code. And as I learned more about other religions and how similar we were to other versions of Christianity, just, you know, different flavor, but basically the same tenets. I think there's no way our random family from the suburbs unlocked the perfect balance of golden truth for all these things. This just doesn't all add up. We've got one pastor saying, you know, Joel Osteen saying, God wants you just to be happy and lovely and turn your scars into stars and your tragedies into triumphs. And, you know, that kind of just super positive, a shiny messaging that was like, everything's good, God's grace is here. And then other pastors who are spitting on you because they're so fervently preaching about hell and brimstone and how, you know, sodomites should be burned with meteorites, with meteors from the sky and punished for their sin. And I was like, this doesn't all fit together. How arrogant. And I think that eclectic, broad sense that, like, we didn't just have one thing. I was like, this is way too big and way too convoluted to be true. And I think that's what led me to the point of deconstruction, adding into it as well the queer layer of like, I can't exist in this world. So either I'm going to have to die or get out. And I think that extreme cliff moment right on the precipice was a huge driving factor to go, well, if I'm going to start taking it apart, better take it all apart, damn it, and kind of going in from there. But I do think other people can stay in it, because when it's dysfunctional, but it's not as dysfunctional, it still brings a lot of comfort. I mean, in church, you have communities, you have concerts that you get to go with, the same familiar faces of people you get to see. If you have a life event, someone brings you a casserole. Like, there are elements that's just simply human connectivity that gets attributed to spirituality, faith, and religion, when it's just humans looking out for each other and learning that humans can still look out for each other outside of the context of religion, is something that is such a no-brainer now. But believing and realizing, oh, this person caring for me, or me enjoying a concert with other Christians, that can translate outside of the church, outside of the abuse, and I can still feel these feelings and feel this connectivity and feel this happiness outside of this. It seems impossible. It really does.
And you talk about that transitions again very well into my next point. And again, this is the part I'm sure I put it in the title, and at least a few of you want to hear about. But being kind of an early adopting family of a lot of these ideologies, y'all were IBLP well before it was cool. But part of that, and something that one of the things I would push a lot of people interested in this stuff to check the book out for in particular is you I don't want to say rubbed elbows, that might be controversial for them. You side hugged a lot of celebrities in these worlds. I won't be too coy about it. Very specifically, the Duggars and the Bates families, and the Forsyths, who not as many people know, but who have married into the Duggar family now. So anytime you marry into the Duggar family, and good Lord, there's 19 of them. That's 19 shots to marry in. So a lot of people are going to do it. Your whole profile raises. So, and you interacted with all of these folks. Now, I don't want to get you in trouble or have you telling too many tales out of school. And I know we got to leave a little bit of something for the book, but can you maybe comment a little bit about, some of the Duggars and Bates you knew, the Forsyths you might have known, your experiences with them? If you have a favorite and feel comfortable saying it, maybe mentioning that. But for those of us who aren't affiliated, what can you tell us?
So it's crazy because it was right as they were rising into popularity, and they had a chokehold on the homeschool community. So we would go to these big family conferences at Big Sandy. So picture West Texas, flat plains, fir trees, dusty dirt roads, a big metal warehouse conference center. It was a warehouse with this red carpeting turned into a conference center. And the Duggars had just started getting popular. They would come to this conference, they would set up a table and sell copies of their own show, which is just such an odd thing to do, but they would sell copies of their own show. And when we would be sitting, they would come sit towards the front, and everyone in the audience, you could just see the heads were turned, just gawking at them.
Our family is just so inspired by you, and we watch your show every week. My daughter Bentley had this great idea. She was wondering if you would be able to sign our hairspray bottle.
I've never been asked that before. That's really something.
I mean, the mindset of a homeschooler, the feeling of feeling cool is just non-existent at all. Popular, cool, and the Duggars introduced that to the game. And so seeing people who were cool within those circles, which is its own hilarious commentary, was something else. And so to be out and play ultimate frisbee on the, in an open field and, run or toss the frisbee to one of the Duggars or interact with them was just like this. I don't even know how to describe it. It was just meeting a celebrity. It was odd. And then they would invite people at the end of the conference to their campsite, and they would cook hot dogs for everyone. And getting invited to that was just on the same level as receiving an invitation to some sort of Hollywood award show. I mean, getting them to invite you or come up to your tent site or come up to your camper and hey, my name's Jim Bob. We're having some hot dogs if you want to come over, was just this highlight moment. And somehow in that, I'm almost the same age as Austin. We met them. They happened to camp next to us, or somehow we crossed paths. And another thing that really appeals to this mindset is if you have any kind of problem, you solve it with hard work. Go move some rocks from that side of the field to the other, go mow a couple acres, and that'll set you straight. I wasn't really having issues with my parents, but I was a city kid for sure, staying at home. And so they wanted me to have that like country, fresh air, hard work experience. And so the Forsyths run a family camp. And so they were building a zip line and they were building all these attractions on their property.
An unregulated, unchecked. I wanted to highlight there were no permits on this thing. Jen and I joke about how much Christians love zip lines. You were the first time I ever thought to check about, like, when's the last time this was inspected? So you may have saved my life if I ever cheekily go on a zip line. I will be asking for the inspection report.
Yeah, if it's a religiously affiliated red zip line, don't ride on it. You know, there's not a single test has been done.
Enjoying creation and spending time together as a family with home-cooked meals and some of the best attractions, rifle range, archery range. We have the long zip line. We've just installed a new underground hidden mine shaft slide. It's a crowd pleaser. The kids have a blast.
But no, I went and we would clear land and pull rocks out of the field and haul off trees and clean the cabins. And honestly, those were good memories. I mean, most of my life was spent at home. And so the chance to leave and get this feeling of independence and making a friend and playing broom ball. I'd seen it on my parents bought their TV show. We watched episodes of them playing broom ball, and to go to Fayetteville and they rented out a court and we got to play. It was just this crazy experience. Or to play on they had a sports court at the back of the Duggars house, and late nights playing volleyball. I mean, those were good times, and it was what we had. And it was times where we weren't being hovered over by our parents and where we weren't made to sit and listen to hours and hours of preaching, because that was really when we got together. It was predicated on spending the entire day in sessions, in these learnings. And so getting to spend those few minutes of playing volleyball, or even joking and testing the limits of what you could say and what was okay. Because, like, you know, kids, they're naturally a little rebellious. You wanted to see, could I say something a little crass, or can I, like, how do I act, or what does it mean to try to elevate myself in this space? I mean, most things, what I'm describing, everyone's doing by going to school, and they're learning these things from a young age. But here we are, a bunch of awkward as all hell teenagers who don't understand our bodies, don't understand anything about the reality of the world, finally together, like awkwardly looking at each other like a bunch of like little shaking chihuahuas, like having these moments. And yet they were good. I stayed with the Forsyths for weeks at a time. We would work together, and then on the weekends we would spend Sundays at home watching Bible tapes all day. Things like the King James Version is the only version of the Bible, and if you read any other version, you're going to go astray. And listening to their pastor, his name was Paul Caldwell, I think he's still involved, preach fire and brimstone messages. He would say, you know, the Bible doesn't say homosexual, it doesn't say gay, it says sodomites, and that's how we should call them. And I went with their group in Fayetteville to get people to sign the petition back when there was a wave. I mean, there's been waves of this crisis, manufactured crisis. I'm using air quotes for anyone who's just listening, but of trans people in the bathroom bills when I almost said Michelle Obama. When Michelle Duggar was robocalling and campaigning about that, I was there with them, standing on steps trying to get people to sign petitions against basic rights for trans individuals. And I knew it was wrong. I didn't have the language for it. I just knew, I was like, I don't know the answer. I don't know much about trans folks, but I'm kind of curious. And I know that this isn't what God called us to do. And I didn't know what the answer was, but I knew in the moment it was wrong.
Critics say the family's recent anti-LGBT statements have gone just too far. Matriarch Michelle Duggar did a robocall in August when the City Council of Fayetteville, Arkansas was considering an anti-gay discrimination ordinance.
The Fayetteville City Council is voting on an ordinance this Tuesday night that would allow men, yes, I said men, to use women's and girls' restrooms, locker rooms, showers, sleeping areas, and other areas that are designated for females only. I don't believe the citizens of Fayetteville would want males with past child predator convictions that claim they are female to have a legal right to enter private areas reserved for women and girls. We should never place the preference of an adult over the safety and innocence of a child. Parents, who do you want undressing next to your daughter at the public swimming pool's private changing area?
But yeah, those are my memories. And one of the sadder ones was, you know, the Duggars are in the spotlight, and the spotlight also comes with some boundaries for them because they can only go to certain extremes because they're so watched. But a lot of families, like my family and many other families, aren't watched. They operate in obscurity, hoping to be like the Duggars. They really are idolized because they're rich and they drive blacked out Suburbans and they own a plane. And there's a lot within that community. They're at the very top of it. And one of the families that really idolized them went to the same sessions, listened to the same pastors. Their daughter ran away, and the police were able to find her and help bring her back home. But there's a lot of dysfunction. A lot of the families are super, super impoverished. of course, you can imagine having a massive family. Like the Duggars are honestly the best case scenario because at least they have money and they have enough public scrutiny to keep them from doing certain crazy things. Because a lot of the smaller families engage in a lot more physical abuse and have like a lot more dysfunction that at least the Duggars could afford therapy or counseling. And a lot of these families just don't have options. And they're suffering in the shadows, they're suffering in silence. That's also mixed in a lot of my memories, is seeing people who, they come to the potluck and the kids are eating like they haven't had a meal all week. That kind of stuff is also running alongside this image of this big kooky family that likes to play broomball and goes to family conferences. Like that's the Duggars' reality, but for many of the kind of accessory families, they suffer profoundly.
I'm not going to give away too many of the people in there, but I do have to let everyone know that one thing you did confirm to us is that Lawson Bates is as difficult in person as he likes to be on the internet. But at the same time, we have a lot of, as you've talked about with these big families, it's very difficult. You talked about Lawson's lawn care business in the book, and we have discussed on the channel before kind of the parentification involved in that, making a child the breadwinner as part of this world. And so I want to try to transition into that, because one of the other things I think that Band does really well that I haven't seen from a lot of other people exploring this space is an exploration of the educational neglect that is involved in homeschooling, unschooling, as some of them want to call it, and kind of all of how that plays into itself. You mentioned a little bit earlier about operating your family's business and how they were involved in multi-level marketing schemes, and you were being kind of child labored into that. And I really just want to address that. And I want to kind of start with a bit of an indictment on a program that I have heard about from other people, but never seen written about until your book, Switched on Schoolhouse. Can you tell us what role that program played in kind of the educational neglect that you discuss in the book? Because I think that's kind of central to a lot of it.
Well, one, being the oldest in the family and noticing and being very keenly aware of how much my family was suffering was a shared experience in these communities. And so you do want to help. I did gain many practical skills through that experience, but also framing that through the lens of being a young person growing up, missing out on childhood, missing out on creativity, learning, and adjusting to the world at the appropriate paces instead of carrying a weight similar to what the grown-ups were supposed to be carrying is its own thing. Some would define it as traumatic, some would just define it as complicated, depending on who you ask, that came through that environment. I knew I needed to help my family, and I learned a lot. Some of the lessons still stick with me about like working hard and work ethic, but it was through such a dysfunctional lens. It's like there's other ways to communicate these messages other than the child labor under the guise of teaching your child good character. A lot of these families will say, start your own business or be entrepreneurial, but then they don't give the children the choice of, well, what does that person want to do? Because being a serial entrepreneur is a fantastic way to go if that's what you want to do and that's what you feel like you're called to. You can make that choice, but again, not everyone has that choice. And whenever that's the only thing offered to you, then is it really a choice to be a homemaker or to work in the family business? It's just that's all you've got. Even a couple of my siblings have gone into the Army, and it's a choice they've made. But when you look at that was a choice out of what other choices, that they were kind of non-existent. And that is all underpinned by the education we received or lack of education we received. For a big chunk of my bringing up, we used the wisdom booklets. We ordered them and would get them on a regular cadence from IBLP, and I would fill them out. But often we were too busy doing chores, laundry, going to the grocery store, just running day-to-day family. So it started with some level of attention, but eventually became essentially, if my parents saw handwriting in the book, they would just be like, yep, you've done your lesson, that's good, without really any critical analysis, grading, discussion, or the developmental side that would come along with that. And then through the Duggars, we learned about Switched on Schoolhouse. I think now it's digital. Back in the day, it would come on a packet of CD-ROMs that you would load into the computer, and the curriculum would all scan in, and you would open this virtual learning portal that ran locally on your machine. And there was a student app and a teacher app, and they would talk to each other. It was very poorly designed and a very bad excuse for an education.
Welcome to Switched on Schoolhouse. The Switched on Schoolhouse curriculum offers many features to make life easier for parents, teachers, and students. Auto-grading is a great feature. Approximately 85% of a student's work is graded automatically, allowing more time for parents and teachers to spend with their students. Parents, planning a family vacation? No problem. Advanced lesson planning will automatically reschedule your students' lessons around your family time.
I've never tapped into the public school system for my own children, and I may one day, but at this point I'm not doing it. I don't actually need it, and I'm content with where we're at, but we want to support the families that would like to put their children in a God-honoring and biblically sound environment, and also a desire for freedom, personal freedom to travel, to do the things that interest myself and my husband, and it's allowed us to be spontaneous and to do things we could not do if we were locked in.
One, it was extremely hackable. So I learned how to give myself 4 times to answer a 3-choice question. So you could, get good grades without even trying. So it's very hackable. There was no conversation, no creative component, no discussion that happened. So you'd kind of read and answer as you went. And as long as you could do that, you could get a passing grade, but it was really based on nothing. And that was my high school education, was spent hacking my way through that. And it's, of course, with no surprise here, very much so coming from a Christian perspective. So the history that's taught, the science that's taught or isn't taught, all comes through a lens that suits Christian nationalist thinking. So either parts of history are omitted or they're softened, or if it's science, it's teaching like creationism or other things. It's not even teaching you multiple theories so that you can make your choice. It's a literal high school curriculum that's like, God created the earth in these days, and on this day this happened, and that's how it's presented. So you're left with not being brought to the educational standard of peers. And while I've written a book now, and while it is doing well now, and while I have a good job now, this is all in spite of that upbringing. And I had a very painful, very slow, very methodical process of learning basic things from really 22 to 27 of catching up on things and developmentally, emotionally, and just tactile knowledge of history and events that were just completely missing from my upbringing. And some of those things were even away from history, simple education around drugs, alcohol, safe sex, those things that they just directly impact your life are completely missing. And so you're very vulnerable. Anyone who grows up in this environment is very vulnerable for a number of years until they can learn these things. If not, you're just kind of taught abstinence only, never touch alcohol, never touch drugs. But in my mind, I was 25 before I realized there's a difference between marijuana and heroin. I had no reference point for how people used them, what they made you feel like, what was safe, what was unsafe, what was the education surrounding, even outside of missing historical events. Because it's like, well, if you don't, who among us is a perfect historian, but even down to the practical things of knowing, it was just, nope, just, you don't need to know about that because you're never going to be in that situation. And if you ever are, say no and run away. As nice of an idea as that is, that's not the reality of how humans work or how the world works. If you really care about giving your kid their best shot, you're going to give them the information and trust that they're going to be able to make good decisions for themselves as they grow.
It's interesting you bring that up because the lack of trust that all of this comes up a lot. The fact that nobody distrusts their own children like a Christian homeschooling parent. And I specifically bring up Switched On Schoolhouse because I learned when I did an episode a while back about the Tuttle twins, and I learned about their homeschool curriculum that they have. Obviously theirs was very, constitutional and libertarian, and that was the agenda they wanted to push. But there are also some of these programs, Switched On Schoolhouse in my opinion being one of them, especially given your discussion of it, that are designed to be circumnavigated or circumvented. That's the word I'm looking for. Circumvented. So basically, they're designed to get your kid off that damn computer as soon as possible so they can get back to balancing your checkbook or getting their siblings' laundry in the washer or whatever it may be. It's very insidious. I mean, because the people who are making programs like this, I mean, obviously when you're doing it from your perspective, you're not thinking about like, this has a programmer, this has someone behind it, but the people behind it have to know how it's being utilized. Otherwise, they wouldn't have made it that way. And so I'm really glad that you bring that up and talk about how easy it was to get around that program and how unprepared it leaves you. But it's all based, ironically, on this lack of trust between the evangelical parent and child. That being said, you also, and another thing you do a really good job of breaking down in this book, and I think it's very important for particularly a lot of people in an audience like ours who are recovering from this. We've heard from other people who came from a life like you grew up in, that they're self-conscious, that they're worried, that they feel left behind kind of permanently, and that they don't know how to catch up. And I feel like in this book, I mean, which, number one, incredible book. I would never have been able to tell you to. I was waiting for the part of the book where you went to Harvard or something. Like I was just, I'm like, and when did he learn how to do this? And so you clearly learned, but you discuss it, and it was independent because, like you said, a lot of the, ironically, we talk about, me and Jen talk about how these Christian homeschool parents ironically produce really great children, and they don't even know it because y'all are incredibly resourceful and incredibly, incredible problem solvers, and you kind of did that for yourself utilizing the internet. That was where the re-education of Weston Brown took place, was online. And as someone who makes content online and likes to believe that they can reach people in that capacity, can you tell us a little bit more about how you filled those gaps in your own education? One, how you even recognize them, but then once you recognize them, how you on your own started filling those gaps in.
Immediately, I almost feel a little emotional thinking about it, but it made me feel so much gratitude for you and Jen, because your channel back in the day also helped me deconstruct other ideas that I still hadn't faced yet. And something that meant so much to me about your approach with these sensitive topics.
I'm going to tear up.
Is,
he's going to be the only one on camera because I'm not going to let y'all see me. Thank you so much.
No,
but anyway.
but no, your intentionality to be snarkers, but to be ethical snarkers. And that created so much safety because I was really groomed to believe that anyone who wasn't in was this dark, vapid person that just sit around laughing, pointing fingers, was lonely and miserable, hyped up on drugs and alcohol and depressed, and that anyone who had something to say kind of fit into that persona. And my parents never said that explicitly, but somehow that's how I was picturing anyone who was on the outside. And so anyone, and just, you and Jen are just exemplary of this, of saying, we're going to make fun of this. We're going to laugh. We're going to have a good time. We're also going to hold accountability, and we're also not going to bully children, and we're not going to exploit these people who are already in a state of exploit. So that was something that was profound because I early on started finding my way to things like free ginger. I mean, that's like a deep cut back in the day.
Yeah.
Some of those forms, and it was much more the Wild West, uncensored, and it was still really helpful. But finding sources of information that were safe, and it's just really hard work to confront these things because I remember it'd be activating in my nervous system. I'd want to get up and pace. I would walk around the backyard like in circles, like an animal, just like walking in a pattern, just like thinking and trying to break down these ideas and figuring it out. It was really hard. I don't know why I did it, but I just couldn't shake that while I knew something was wrong about the way we were living, and I didn't know what was right, even our stances around money and health and all these things. So it was when the iPhone first came out, I finally got like a third generation or like a 3 pre-owned iPhone with and that was my world.
He was the boy who was given a Microsoft manual, and he read the whole thing. He understood how to use the computer. He built websites, very bright. If you want to ruin somebody, okay, you've got a son and you want to ruin him, give him an iPhone at 15 and don't put any protection on it. And that's what we did.
And then I started watching people and telling their stories of their upbringings and realizing that I wasn't the only one who experienced this. And what really did is when I started hearing oddly enough, ex-Mormon and going I know nothing about Mormons at all, but it's the same shit in a different package. And realizing oh, wow, this is just a system. It's not, that's all it is. So it was very slow and steady and gradual. It took me a long time, even facing things like conversations around race and white supremacy and learning about that. It was friends who were very gentle and giving me time and space and saying, if you want to know more, check out this podcast or this book, and digesting those things little by little. But I don't have a specific answer for it. I think I just felt so dumb and so outside of things. And it's such a bad feeling. And I was like, I've got to figure out what the answer is. And then realizing so many people have walked this path before, or maybe they haven't walked the path, but they're a teacher and educator who takes delight in helping other people come up and understanding and knowing I don't want to feel uninformed or awkward. Even just basic adjustment into life. We were so isolated that there was a time when walking up to a Starbucks counter and ordering a coffee was awkward. And I hated being seen and I felt awkward ordering and asking. It didn't last very long. I got through it. Like I wasn't like shaking in the corner. Like I definitely got through it. But those are some of the things that like that's how you don't leave the home. It's mental. It's like an animal that lives in a cage. When that cage eventually comes away, it's like, well, do they, there's a reacclimation period, and that's really what it was like. I still had plenty of good moments. It wasn't all doom and gloom. I mean, but that adjustment and that was really brutal. But sources, this channel came at the later stages of that, but sources like this were just phenomenal to listen to someone who has the capacity to do the research, to present the arguments, to present the information. And really what I found was it was in here all along. It was I understood that on some level, but you guys like de-encrypted it, or you had the key. And I was like, oh, I knew this was dysfunctional, whether it was issues on race inequality or queer people or these religious breakdowns. I knew those things, and I just didn't have the words for it. And then once I heard it, I was like, that's what I've been feeling. That's what I've been thinking. It was in there all along. It was just getting it out. And it goes back to why people like my parents want to keep these stories silenced. I mean, my parents now have gone very public in advocating for extreme measures of censorship in school libraries in Texas, where none of their remaining 7 or 8 children are enrolled, because I think on some level they know the power of stories. And I felt so alone and didn't have a voice, didn't have power, until I realized someone else had experienced something like that. And then when our two voices join together, it just grows exponentially from there. And you realize that there are hundreds of thousands of supporters for every naysayer that I came across. And then that became empowering, which continued to grow until I had the ability to heal to a point of actually speaking out and calling out the dysfunction. Is in a big arc of reclaiming this, is becoming the person that I needed all those years ago, or trying to become that person.
Well, and that's wonderful. And I think that, I mean, obviously, this book is, in my opinion, written by the mentor a lot of people are looking for, because this is it's a bit of a roadmap to how to get out. And I won't necessarily, because number one, read the book. But number two, I also want, I don't want to detail necessarily too much beyond that. You did eventually escape, and there was a painful transition process of leaving your parents' home and ending up in some really rough situations that you should have been prepared for, but maybe weren't because of your background. You lived through it, you tapped into your network, and you came out the other side. And then even we're advocating, one thing that really caught me, and I mentioned earlier that the book kind of has this hero's journey feel to it, where throughout the whole first 2/3, honestly, of the book, you're kind of lamenting the things you didn't do, the times you could have stood up for a sibling and didn't, or the times you could have challenged a belief and didn't. And bless your heart, I'm sitting on the outside going, oh, honey, it's not your fault. Like, you're doing the best you can to survive. You're in survival mode. And then you end up, a bit of a spoiler, you end up at the Gateway megachurch in Dallas, which is going through its own scandal right now. For the sake of time, I'll probably keep that one out. But in those interactions, you have this incredible moment of really sticking up for someone else who was discovering their own queer identity. And to me, it would have been this incredible ending. You get that moment there, and then you struggle as you come out and get your own place, and things come into order, and you find the relationship that's healthy and all of that. That would have been a great ending. That would have been a really lovely, healing ending. Unfortunately, your mother, and you gave me the transition here, your mother did not let that be the ending of the story. She has decided to have a new endeavor. The final thing I think we need to talk about, the grand battle at the end of like I said, it feels like, I don't know, it feels like the Odyssey. Like I don't want to compare your mother to the Minotaur necessarily, but like you got to the end of the maze and there's a fight there.
Yes, we disciplined our children. No, with rare exception would anybody ever be over disciplined in our home. And any child that responded to discipline didn't get more discipline. So if someone got more correction of any kind, whether it be physical or not, would be based on their response. Now, scripture doesn't just teach physical discipline, but it does teach it, and you can figure that out yourself.
You've alluded to it, you've mentioned it a little bit, but and we're coming close to the end here. Give us a little more detail about what your mom's, and she's still in the middle of this. Like, she hasn't given this fight up. She is, what we're talking about, everyone, right now is happening right now. Weston fired back, but they're still out there fighting this. So can you tell us exactly what your mom is doing down there in Texas? And then please also tell us how you responded.
Oh my gosh, yes. So we get to this point. I mean, first of all of these organizations we have named are collapsing on themselves if they haven't already collapsed. Gateway Church, huge scandal, well documented. Just Google it. Robert Morris, spiritual advisor to Trump, sexual assault allegations, ousted from his ministry. Bad guy, collapsing. Bill Gothard, well documented. That ministry he was ousted from, collapsing. Vision Forum collapsed after sexual assault. There were other leaders within Gateway besides Robert Morris. Like, all of this is crumbling, laden with scandals, not just small scandals, but massive, like from wire fraud to CSA content we know with the Duggars. I mean, so many heartbreaking, deeply devastating things, all ironically stuff that these people finger point to everyone else is doing, the calls coming from within inside the house. So that's one thing, just for the record, that all of these groups, they still have steam, and it's not to say the story's over, because they're still fighting. And especially Wall Builders, Patriot Academy, they need to be stopped, and they need people to share their stories and to come forward with everything they know about it, because it is one that is still moving with a lot of momentum. And of course, these things rebrand, they go away and come back. And I left the Fundy group and went to Gateway just to find myself in a bigger bubble. It was just a little more polished with a cool website. But the story goes, I went through this incredibly painful and, oh gosh, the only word that's coming to my mind is discombobulating, which is a very silly word. Discombobulating period of time.
Flex that vocabulary. I love it.
Of coming to terms with my sexuality and realizing I would rather face this and just be authentically myself and put to rest this notion of two versions of me, because this is truly killing me. That's not a metaphor, killing me. So I came out to my parents. I did it via a letter, and the relationship was completely ended. Siblings, years passed.
This is, I believe it's in Isaiah, but it says, I have seen his ways and will heal him. I will lead him also, and I will restore comforts unto him and to his mourners. Who mourned? I mourned. When my son was 22 and my little baby was 2 months old, and he came out to us and told us he had always been this way, we knew that wasn't true. We also know what honors God. And even if you've always been this way, we know what honors God and we know what doesn't. I popped up an old blog the other day and put it on my Facebook so people could see what my older son had written nearly 10, 15 years ago. So you could see a truth, because things he had written today as an adult that he claims are true are not. And there's so many things. And I'm sorry for him that he doesn't know the truth on so many things. And I hope you have a really good day. And don't worry about me. Just pray for me. Thank you. And pray for my son that God will redeem him yesterday. Okay, take away these desires that are not from God.
I moved to California and started having a life that I never thought was possible. And I have to acknowledge privilege there, because so many people don't find that path. That I worked very hard and was surrounded by very good people and had a lot of privilege along the way. And not so many people were lucky. This is not a common story. And so I began to rebuild my life and do a lot of things that I like, having hobbies and knowing what music I like and going out and dancing and just like becoming a person. And years pass until literally in this very like cinematic moment, I'm scrolling Twitter on my phone and I see my mom, and I see that it's a retweet from a NBC senior investigative reporter who's following the story of a small Texas mom who's trying to ban books. And I'm watching this video clip of her, and we're no contact at this point. We had gone through many conversations and then reached a point where it was no longer productive. And so I see this video. I had no idea what family life was like. I just had assumed they're living in their small town and doing their thing. And she's saying to the school board, repent and appoint this pastor to, screen books that come in, and you have a bunch of books. What's the harm in getting rid of some of them? And, anyone who's a historian or librarian or educator knows what a terrifying phrase that is when you start easing into this idea of book censorship banning and like book burning.
What do you think about the attack on this awakening and this movement of parents getting in and looking at what are the contents of these books? What do you think of the attack on them saying, oh, it's book burning, it's censorship?
Right.
That's what, that's what the left
Well,
is
it's
saying.
not. And that's
Right.
just a fib. That's a lie, because banning is like if we were to try to completely eradicate it when just nobody is. You live in America, you can go to the bookstore, you can order online anything you want. This is just age-old information. It's illegal for students to use obscene and vulgar language. It's illegal for in an educating setting. You have no place for that kind of content.
And so I see this and I messaged the investigative reporter and I was like, hey, that's my mom. And I don't know where you're at with this story, but if you want to talk, let me know. I hit send, and almost before that, my phone starts ringing. And we have a series of conversations. He releases an article, and it's up. If you just like Google my name and NBC, it comes up, and it's this whole story, this like little vignette into this, where I tell my story. And then that built into actually going back to the small town and giving a speech and urging the school board not to go down a path of banning books, not to go down a path of censorship, but to listen to educators, to listen to librarians, listen to the students, because the students have also been advocating for themselves, saying, we love these books. We see ourselves in these books. Don't ban them. That's essentially banning us. And so I came in, I was like, just, my mom, Monica Brown, is advocating for these things. None of my siblings have ever gone to school. None of us have ever been in here. So please listen to the actual students who are being affected by these policies, educators. So I gave this speech. It was short. It was emotional. It was freaking brutal.
Growing up, we read the Bible cover to cover from the earliest age I can remember. We repetitively read graphic depictions of sex, violence, genocide, sexual assault, and incest. However, topics related to dating, safe sex, drugs, alcohol, or sexual identity were deemed inappropriate or too heavy to discuss. At 15, I was able to access the internet and slowly started piecing together answers to the questions that I had about queerness, gender, and sex. I was profoundly alone on that journey. I knew I didn't fit the blueprint for the life that my parents were grooming me for. I wanted so badly to know that someone like me could find peace, happiness, and love. I would have given anything to read a book with a character that felt the feelings I felt, asked the questions I couldn't ask, and learned the lessons that I needed to learn. It's been nearly 5 years since I came out to my family. I'm not allowed to join in family celebrations or holidays or be a part of my 8 younger siblings' lives, solely because I'm not straight. I believe my parents' response is due to a lack of education and representation afforded to them during their early years. This left them confused, and their confusion led to fear, and their fear has led to a family brutally torn. I'm here today to implore you to listen to librarians, educators, and students, not those speaking from a religious perspective or at the bidding of a political group. Schools should represent all students, regardless of race, gender identity, sexual orientation, or background. We expect you to lead the way in creating an environment that gives each student their best shot, having the information they need to thrive in and connect with the world around them. If you choose to marginalize difference and remove representation, you will only cause harm. History will remember your decisions and demand accountability. Show the world that Granbury will not succumb to fear, but will shine brightly, leading the way for the next generation of Texans. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
I go back and sit down with my friends and support, and then my mom had also signed up to speak, and she gives this kind of unhinged speech. It's scattered. She goes over time. It's dinging in the background. They're like, thank you, Mrs. Brown. Thank you, Mrs. Brown. They're trying to get her to leave the stand. She's kind of flailing around.
Send us back your checklist. Tell us why it's educational. Tell us why it's appropriate so we can understand your mindset. You do that, you're going to have the public go, okay, maybe that's because it has some truth in that book, right? Maybe it's a Holocaust book with nudity all through it and violence. Maybe we need to read that. I have books like that on my shelf at home right now. I have books in my house that discuss major leaders in our community that were lesbians. Yes, Weston's right. We read the Bible cover to cover, but we never had sexually explicit. Just as an example, in the scripture it says Adam knew Eve. That's not the same as saying he stuck his dick in her body, and that's what you've got in your library. Listen, that's what you've got, y'all.
It's in your library.
It's in your library, y'all. I'm going to go now. I published it all. I published it all. You can see. Thank you, Miss Brown. Thank you, Miss Brown. I'll go. I'm sorry about the decisions y'all are making. It's pretty sad to watch.
NBC is there. They're interviewing me post speech. My mom's standing there recording this moment. I mean, it's just so like you're just getting chills the whole time. And I couldn't see her because there were lights shining in my face. So I'm talking. She's right there. And then someone is like, wait, that's Monica. That's Monica. So they turn the camera on her and she just kind of jets off to the car and doesn't say anything. And that's sort of, I mean, that's the story. And then after that, I realized I had more to say and realized that people were willing to listen. I didn't think people were willing to listen. And that started the process of telling the story and writing it in a format of a letter to my siblings who I cannot communicate with. I can only communicate them as they age out of the home, but there's still most of them live at home. And so I wrote it as a letter to them. So as the reader, you're reading it as a perspective of my sibling, starting from early years to the things I experienced, all the way to this big confrontation of saying, if I'm picking a side, I'm with the librarians, I'm with the educators, and I'm asking you to listen to these people and listen to your children, because the message that we're saying is protect the kids. Yet what you're really doing is, for me, and again, in the book, in very vulnerable positions, that if I would have had a little more education. Sometimes people make bonehead decisions, but at least make that bonehead decision with the knowledge that someone said that may not be the right choice, that may have consequences, instead of having no information at all. And urging parents to say, what an honor it could be to embrace challenging topics with your children and to say, well, gosh, I don't know about it, but let's figure it out together, because your kids are smarter than you think. They're going to figure it out. And for me, I was figuring it out on Yahoo Answers, where God knows who was saying God knows what. I could have had the opportunity to learn that with a parent through safe, accurate information, instead of figuring it out on my own and experiencing very real harm. So if your message is to protect the children, that looks like giving them the information that they need versus keeping them isolated, keeping them paranoid of the world around them, afraid of teachers, afraid of doctors, afraid of literal librarians. And that was the moment that I was like, if you're going to bully librarians, I can step away from my new life for just a minute and tap back in long enough to say that I'm still here and I came through this. And I would hope to God that this is not a pattern that other parents are going to follow after for their children. I think there's a better way.
I wanted to kind of end on this particular story, one, because it's the end of the book, but also because it is this incredible moment, this full circle moment. I can't protect who I was in the past, but I can protect the kids who are me now. I can step up for them. And it is important to highlight because, Jen and I, who come as outsiders, can look at things and have our role in the process and point out that's kind of absurd, even from an outside perspective. What we can't necessarily do is speak evangelical fluently. What we can't do is speak that language, understand how those words go together. I steal phrases all the time from them, but I don't always know. I'm still trying to learn what a testimony even actually is, because I've seen several variants. You all can instinctively know that. You can hear it and check in with it, and as soon as you hear it, you're talking on a level that no one else can, both to outsiders like Jen and I, but also to the people whose minds we really want to change, folks on the inside. Y'all are invaluable. People like you, Weston, are invaluable to that cause. And I want to highlight that as we're starting to wrap things up, and we are wrapping things up. I just want to say thank you for writing this. This book was not necessarily, I read it, thoroughly enjoyed it, but I can also tell it wasn't necessarily for me and Jen, beyond just being interested parties. This is for a lot of the people we've talked to when in the course of working on this channel, the people whose stories we hear, the folks on our Discord, we love all of you. This book is really for them. I feel like you are a beacon of growth and progress and positivity to a group of people who are always looking for, or a lot of them at least, are looking for a model or looking for a roadmap. I grew up this way. I was separated from the world. It was me and my siblings and my family against the world. I learned later that's not how life was, and it's not the way I wanted to live. That faith that was so central to my life, it doesn't work anymore. It doesn't do anything for me anymore. And I don't know where to go from here. And ironically, Jen and I talk to people who are kind of in the middle of that journey. Whereas, to be frank, Weston, I would, and I know you may not feel this way, but you're someone who's very far along in that journey. And I think this book is a testament to it. So as kind of a final question, I guess I would ask, for the folks in our audience who are where you used to be, who are kind of at that pivot point, who obviously, if you're watching this, chances are you've broken around the family filter and that says something. So for people who are in that position, who want to overcome the difficulties of the past, the educational neglect, the physical, mental, spiritual abuse, but don't necessarily know how and are kind of just out in uncharted water, what advice do you have for them? Where would you point them to maybe start?
I think one is I had to get to a place of safety and peace physically before I could tackle some of these higher concepts, because thinking about them and addressing these concepts, like what happens if I stop tithing? What happens if I choose to have a glass of wine? And like chewing on those concepts, what happens if I change my mind to think it's okay to say damn now, whereas before I believed I was releasing an energetic curse? Like it's like holding a live wire, and it takes a lot of energy to even begin to process those things. So to anyone who's in that, is one, it sounds really hollow, but really remember you're not alone. There are so many experiences of this, and nothing you've experienced is on a very up close level. Yes, it's unique, but stepping back, these patterns of control and these systems are very well documented, and you're not alone in your experiences. Two is give yourself permission not to have to sort everything out all at once. The truth and the light will come in its own time. Focus on taking care of yourself, because if your body, if your nervous system isn't calm and safe, it's going to be really hard to tackle these concepts that have been given. And three or four, whatever point I'm on, is trust your instincts. If something seems off, it probably is. There's a lot of concerning language that I grew up with that was like, in the end times, the good will be bad and the bad will be good. And so people say is good is bad, but it's really not. And trying to sort out for yourself what is good and what is bad is a very personal journey. And don't let anyone do that for you. Prioritize your own well-being. Trust if something seems off, and also give yourself permission not to understand certain things, or not to understand them for now. If you come up against a big existential question, I realized that I had to first, in some areas, release a belief and give myself permission not to immediately replace it with something and not have the answer, and trust that there's so much goodness in that, and that it actually was far more peaceful than having to immediately have an answer. And now my beliefs are so much more independent while still being interconnected, that I can individually look at them, whereas they were so tangled up before that if you pulled the thread on one thing, the whole thing falls apart, and it's really scary. So for me, giving myself permission to let something go and know that will fill back in when the time is right, and I don't have to do that today. And also making the choice to move forward, because experiencing this kind of dysfunction and abuse, the most powerful tactic it has is to create loneliness and shame. So anytime you can try, and as you have the energy, connecting with other people and dismantling the shame around it, those are just really honorable pursuits. And just trust that the healing comes in its time. It's not a linear journey. There will be moments of clarity, moments of confusion, but think about, what advice would you give to a really good friend? And if they were asking you this question, how would you guide them? Because a lot of Christianity erases that sense of self, and it gives you this sense of, I can bear this. This is hard, but I can deal with it. But think about yourself as your own best friend. And if your friend, someone you really cared about and loved, came to you and needed advice on something, what would you tell them? And let that guide you, and trust that life will have its beautiful way of unfolding if you stay in tune with your heart, if you stay rested and take care of yourself. Because if you're up here in survival mode all the time, it's really hard to come down and approach topics that have been told are off limits. And it's a day at a time, and you'll get there. hope is never gone, and the resiliency that you come through on the other side of this, just there's a funny karmic sense of balancing that once you can, it's like a roller coaster. Once you can get up and you can get up and get up, that momentum starts going in a positive way, and it's the most beautiful experience. You just have to give yourself the grace to get there.
I always like to say that the irony of families like yours and parents like yours is they end up creating their own worst enemies. Super independent, super motivated, super hardworking Bible scholars who now are ready and rearing to rip that book to shreds. And so you all are the front line of this movement, the deconstruction movement, the dismantling of toxic American Christianity, and the attempt to rebuild it into something better, whatever that may end up being. You all are at the front of it. People like you, Weston, are at the front of it. Thank you so much. This is normally the part where we tell people kind of what you got going on, and we've talked a lot about band. We will have all the links in the description down below. And like I said, get it now, because you're not good. I just have this feeling you're not going to be seeing this version up forever, and certainly not for free. But in the meantime, I know you also mentioned to me before we started recording another project you've got coming down the pipeline. Can you tell us a little bit about that before we end today?
So in addition to this, there's a phenomenal documentary called The Librarians, and it's still in film festivals, but it follows the story of librarians who are standing up against book banning and censorship. And I have a very small segment of adding my voice to that, of someone who experienced that, or where internet, where media, where movies, where books were perfectly censored to my parents' taste, and what my retroactive critiques on that system are. And so right now it's not available for streaming or anything. So all I can say is follow me on social media or go to the band website, but follow the social media there, because then I'll have updates as it comes out. I'm so excited about it. It's been getting phenomenal reviews. You can also follow The Librarians. It's at The Librarians on Instagram. And actually, it's the same handle across all socials, but it's been getting phenomenal reviews, and it tells a story of our quiet heroes who are standing up for representation. And as like a now massive library nerd, to get to be in the company of librarians, and not just librarians doing their jobs at once, who are literally risking their careers to say, we are not throwing that book away. It has not gone through due process. It deserves to be here. It's appropriately categorized, blah, 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 and standing up against actual book burners. It's a phenomenal story. So follow at The Librarians for info when it comes out soon. And then, just like James said, bandthebook.com is the website. It's the kind of manuscript, rough author's draft now that's out, and then it's in process of traditional publishing that will be out sooner. But I wanted to remove any barriers to entry. So it's free for now. And then as it reaches for traditional publishing, hopefully you'll see it on the shelves of bookstores in your neighborhoods. But right now I felt an urgency to get this story out to anyone who's willing to listen here and now. So bandthebook.com and at The Librarians Film.
Excellent. And again, read it now, because we all know those editors love to take the best and the juicy stuff out. So who knows what they'll make him take out. In the meantime, though, I just want to thank you again so much, Weston, for taking the time to sit down with us here. This has been incredibly enlightening for me, just like your book was. Like I said, I'm an outsider. I'm learning a lot. So you're teaching people about this world and this life that you came from. But also, I know very much the audience this is for. And if you feel like this book is something you need on your journey, I'm going to invoke the language. The Lord's putting it on your heart. You do need it. It will help. So thank you so much. And otherwise, to the rest of you all the Genonites out there, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time. Whew. All right. The interviews don't take quite as much wind out of me, just because I love chatting with all these folks. But all the same, another Fundy Fridays episode in the books. I'm going to keep this real short and sweet because, no joke, this is being recorded about 3 hours before I release this video. So some of you will actually be seeing this the same day it was recorded. How cool is that? But before I go, of course, I like to give you my little outro and say that we love you all. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch. If you really enjoy what we do here at Fundy Fridays, please take a moment to consider subscribing to either our Patreon or our YouTube channel memberships. We have 2 tiers on both. They're basically exactly the same. $3 and $1, a tier on each, and both of those give the exact same benefits. Subscribing to either our Patreon or YouTube memberships gets you access to really cool stuff. For one, it gets you access to our official Fundy Fridays all Genonite Discord server, over 5,000 Genonites strong, talking about the coolest stuff you can think of, the smartest people and coolest people you've ever met, talking about the most interesting stuff you've ever heard of. It is a blast and a great time. Your membership also gets you access to our weekly watch parties on Discord, where we will stream everything from old episodes of The Duggars to new episodes of The Righteous Gemstones to documentaries to random YouTube videos we find, and sometimes even just a little bit of pro wrestling. It's a blast. You get to chat with the Reverend Jen and King James, along with all of your best Genonite friends. It is a hoot and a half. You also get access with your membership to some bonus and unreleased special patron exclusive content, which is all kinds of stuff, everything from behind the scenes footage to extras and extended episodes. We really do try to give you your bang for your buck with it. We try to keep it real cheap because we know money is tight out here and the economy ain't getting no better. But if you find some money burning a hole in your pocket and you want to support what we do at Fundy Fridays, that is the best way to do it. It goes straight to us and it helps keep what we do here free for everyone else. They're really the folks who hold up our community. But if you don't like joining groups, that's fine too. Please, though, maybe consider taking a look at our merchandise, fundyfridays.shop, where you can find all of our newest merch, including things like our militant homosexual hat, our Pride Month demon. I know it's not Pride Month anymore, but as far as I'm concerned, Pride Month is all year round. I mean, look at this little guy. Isn't he adorable? Or you can finally get your hands on the first ever official Fundy Fridays Thank You Michelle merchandise, now available on just about anything you'd want to slap it on. And if you don't have any money to spend, please know that's always okay. Your viewership will always be enough. If you haven't, maybe take a second to consider subscribing to Fundy Fridays or hitting the little notification bell icon so that you're notified every single time we put out something new. But otherwise, if you aren't even compelled to subscribe, that's fine too. Your viewership tonight is enough. I thank you for coming. We love you all. I hope you all have a great night and stay tuned for the next great episode of Fundy Friday.